Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you are viewing this podcast. This is the series we call Race, Culture, in the Church. Race, Culture, in the Church. And I have counted, and it is correct. This will be the 22nd episode of this series. The first being 1 week after the murder of George Floyd. And we've continued that series with different members of the community, theologians, public figures, just average people like you and me. But I am pleased today to have a distinguished person as our guest for the next 30 minutes or so. Chief Deputy Jim Barnes with the Sacramento Sheriff's Office. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate it, and I look forward to the discussion.
I appreciate you being here and just being a part of this. I just gleaned that you're not from Sacramento, you're from Modesto originally.
Correct. Yes, South Modesto.
South Modesto, yes. As opposed to North Modesto.
That is correct.
North Modesto, they have paved streets. South Modesto, I'm just trying to get a sense of Modesto.
South Modesto was more of an industrial area. Okay. I would say probably the north area would be more kind of like your farm agriculture area. So yeah, it was more in the South Modesto where I went to Chrysler Elementary School that is no longer there, and then eventually ended up growing up into Davis High School, and then ultimately coming up here to Sacramento to go to school at Sacramento State.
So Davis High School in Modesto.
Correct, Grace Davis High School.
Grace Davis High School. Your parents, they're still in Modesto?
No, both have passed. My dad, he dealt with his demons through alcohol and at an early age for us, and took his bad days out on us. My mom did the right thing and got us out of that environment. So he was not in our life after that, and then we were raised by my mother.
How was that, being raised by a single mom?
At the time, I didn't know any different because our house was always full of love. We grew up as latchkey kids where when she was finally able to get on her feet, she was working in nursing at Modesto City Hospital, but would work shift work. And so here I was with my brother, he's 4 years older than I am, and we would be on our bikes all day long until the streetlights came on, and then neighbors would check on us, and then she'd come home after a swing shift and make sure we were in the house.
So you're the older brother?
I'm the younger, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I am. I'm the younger brother.
You're the younger brother.
Yes.
So it was the two of you growing up in the house.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
How was it? Just kind of unpack that. I mean, again, as you said, that's the only life you knew.
Yeah.
So it's not unique if that's all you know.
Yeah.
It is. Just
right.
is.
No, when I look back to our childhood, we lived in different communities because the community in the neighborhood in which I lived in, they would be the type that if we were out there causing trouble, they would come out and address it and walk us back home and eventually deal it or call our mom at work. So we knew not to. And as much as, my mom was such a passionate woman and a servant at heart as a nurse, she was a disciplinarian. And we knew, even as two boys, that we thought maybe at times we could overpower her or whatever, she demanded respect, and that was something that we did. So as young kids, did we dabble into trouble? Absolutely, that's what we did, but we played football in the street till the dark, and street lights would come on, and we knew it was time to get in the house. But our neighborhood was always very watchful and mindful that if we were yelling, or even at a young age, if someone was using profanity, people would come out of the house and tell us to stop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But to me, looking back, it was, we didn't know any different. We didn't know we were probably without a lot of financial means. A lot of our clothes came from secondhand stores, but we never knew the difference because it was always full of love.
You mentioned community more than once. That's one thing that I tend to focus on in this discussion. Is community. Give me a working definition of community. What does that look like? And I say working, not a dictionary definition,
right.
But one lived out. What does community look like?
I think for me, community is anybody from all walks of life that are willing to come together to either keep the neighborhood safe, help one another out in times of need. I think communities over times have changed. When we think about when this country was founded, we had certain communities that were based off of blocks. You knew different communities lived there. Now you walk out the door and your community is all walks of life from your right and your left. I think as I see now through my lens, I look at we have a lot of missed opportunities of knowing our neighbors. and being able to be supportive, and how do we help each other out. There's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of, I don't want to say lack of support, because I don't believe it's intentional, but I think a lot of people are just focused on what's going on in their life, that they don't look around. And how can they help? How can they help others out? And I think through my life, looking back, just trying to be intentional about everything. And I know it's a long-winded way of saying it, but I truly believe it's just everybody that is a small community, whether it's living on the same street or even the same neighborhood, but being willing to look out for one another.
Do you believe that what you experienced as community is the same, better, or worse than, say, your daughter who's experiencing community now?
That's a good question. When I look now on what community is, we're obviously we belong to a parish and a school that's faith-based, and so we have a community that's kind of driven by faith. But when I look at where we live, or where we once lived when she was born, we knew our neighbors, but it was different. When I look at it again, as we were younger, there were a lot more people that were interactive, at least where I lived. And now if you're not intentional about getting to know your neighbors and being involved with, whether it's cleanups or anything that you can do to volunteer, it is different. I don't know if it was better. It was lived, and I try and share my experiences with my daughter and tell her the importance of actually not just community, but community service and being able to give back.
So what brought you to Sacramento from Modesto?
In all honesty, it was playing football. I was playing football at Grace Davis High School, then I went to the junior college there at Modesto Junior College, and then ultimately recruited to play at Sacramento State in '93. And then got to play there, and then, tried to think maybe beyond. I was young, and I thought maybe I could play beyond those days. I tried out and eventually was told, I think I've hit my ceiling. And so I became a coach at Sac State for a year. And I really saw kind of how transient that job was. In order to move up the ladder, you had to be willing to move your family and move around. And I was still, young and single, but I wanted something more stable. And I went on a ride along one time, and I was hooked, just because I felt the camaraderie in the profession and the sense of helping a community and helping those who can't help themselves. And as a former offensive lineman, I'm a protector. Mm-hmm. And I think that just kind of drew me, and I felt myself being pulled in that direction more so than me saying that's what I wanted to get into. Not knowing my path, because, my dad, he dealt with the police, but on the wrong side. And so nobody in my family was in the public service other than my mom as a nurse. And so I went into the probation department, worked there for a little bit, and then eventually was accepted into the academy with the sheriff's office.
What drew you to social service as a degree?
Well, I think in the social science, the category, I thought I was going to be a history teacher, a coach, and in college you're trying to figure it out. And I really started getting into that mindset, okay, what's pulling me more than what I'm trying to push for? And as I look back now and reflect, it is a sense of service and that servant mindset that really motivates me. I run a nonprofit now, and I love giving back to the communities and donating to those charities that are in need. And I guess if it's your passion and you're motivated about it, you never can get tired.
Mm-hmm. You're married?
I am.
I'm assuming the missus thinks you're a wonderful guy and all that good stuff.
It depends on what day.
That's true.
Yeah.
Get in line behind me.
Yeah.
It's just, 2 children.
We do, yes.
And that's your community, your immediate community. Mm-hmm. How was that experience? What have you brought to that maybe you carried over from your experience growing up with your brother and your mom? Yeah. And what have you maybe not brought over? Yeah. And it's like, well, I'm going to do different. I'm going to do this instead of that.
No, that's a great question. I think when I look back, my wife, Helena, she is as strong as my mother was and was independent. And when I met Helena, she was a single mom, just as my mom raised us. So there was some parallels there. And for me as a father, it's to make sure I didn't make the same mistakes and be supportive and try and teach those life lessons that your kids can navigate life, because there's some ugliness out there. And how do you navigate that without absolutely trying to steer it for them? Just kind of be influential and have them work through issues, not tell them how to handle situations. That's kind of been my path. Our son, he was 7 when I met him, and then eventually adopted him, and he went on through his journey in life, went into the military, got out. Now he's living in Colorado. Gianna's 13. She's my world. And I look at her and I just see the strength. And maybe there's some parallels. I think I see my mom in there, that strength and the confidence. But just trying to be a good man. And ultimately, what can I offer? We're going to be celebrating our 20th anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
We've been battle tested, in life, and just things that happen because she is a career professional, worked for the Highway Patrol for 28 years. And, her mate.
That can be a toxic mix, having two folks in law enforcement.
It can be. I think over time, it was, towards the end, we balance each other out. She's one of the smartest people I know, and I always tell her, when I had leadership challenges of maybe teams that I ran, and she'd give me advice, and she's like, maybe you take the insecurity of this person, you turn around and use it as a strength to help to get them to get buy-in. And I was like, man, where'd you get so smart? And I asked her, I go, do you use that technique on me? And she goes, no.
Yeah. That's the answer she's giving you, though, right?
But she dominated. She had a very similar upbringing. It was tough, and she struggled, and I think that's where our parallels in life. And she's Hispanic and Sicilian, and 5 foot tall, and rose through the ranks of a male-dominated profession to the level of an assistant chief, which is one of 32 of 11,000 employees. Wow. And, she put in 28 dedicated years. She's not only nationally known, but internationally known regarding her drug recognition and as an expert and an evaluator. And I'm always her biggest fan.
So now you've been with the department, did a little research. I always like to say it's not exhaustive, but research nonetheless. Right. 23 years with the Sheriff's Office, Sacramento Sheriff's Office, 23 years.
Yes, and I look back and through my journey, my career, I've worked every level. I've worked as an officer, obviously in corrections and patrol, as a field training officer, promoted to, actually before promotion, went over to detectives. I worked as a sex assault detective for 4.5 years and then promoted to sergeant. And during the 08-09 cutbacks with economics, myself and several others were demoted to the rank of officer based off budget cuts. Worked patrol, and then I got asked to come over and work homicide. So I worked homicide as an investigator for about a year, re-promoted, and then went back to homicide as a supervisor, and then again promoted to the ranks of lieutenant, captain. Now I'm a chief deputy.
What would you say, we've had Sacramento's chief, now retired Han, here, I think for 3. Yeah. So you have at least 2 more.
I'm all in.
All right.
All in.
It's okay. Yeah. I'm holding you to it.
I appreciate that.
What would you, from where you sit, what's the difference between Sac City and Sac County in terms of law enforcement?
No, you're right. I think there are a lot of parallels. Dan Hahn I consider him a good friend, someone that I actually will pick a phone up and get advice from, because he had to navigate a lot of challenges as the leader of an organization. I think some of the differences, I think fundamentally the way we go about doing a business is the same, but unfortunately, sometimes there's different influences that cause people to either steer situations differently than the other. And I give the example of the protests that happened a couple years ago or throughout the past couple years. We, as the sheriff's office, really took a stance, and our current sheriff took the stance of, we don't want anybody breaking windows, we don't want anybody spray painting buildings. We'll peacefully protest, but as soon as that happens, we were of the mindset that we would shut it down. And sometimes there's different philosophies, but I understood his as far as how they had to navigate that downtown, and it was tough. But what I love about law enforcement, it doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing or what agency you work for, is when major events happen and that call for help comes, everybody comes. And so I think the fundamental difference in law enforcement, it's the same. We want to protect our communities. Also, the parallels are we need to do a better job at building bridges and connections with communities, and not just say we're here to police and we're here to do this and call us when you need us. We need to be out in the communities when things are not going bad.
I need a clicker where, it's like when folks walk through a meter or something, click, 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 click. You've used community probably at least 30 times in the few minutes that we've been talking.
Right.
That's a big doggone deal for me.
Yeah.
That's huge. And words have meaning.
Yes.
And so I really appreciate what you're saying. One of the things that, again, it's not exhaustive research, it's just research. I'm quoting, speaking about Chief Deputy Jim Barnes, quote, has made building a better Sacramento community and protecting the public his lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is.
Those are big shoes to stand in. You want to walk?
Yeah, I'd love to. So what I mean by that is ever since I got into the position of influence, even as not only an officer, but I say if influence as a commander of a division, my message to all of my employees have always been connect with the community. And we need to hear the voices on what is needed for us to make some of these fundamental changes moving forward without compromising public safety.
And the community means those that don't have as big a voice or megaphone as some do, that maybe don't vote as often, that some don't live in the same zip codes. Everybody's part of community?
Everybody. So I have a philosophy, and anybody that's ever worked for me or around me, I always say everybody has a voice. And we have to provide those platforms for people to speak on either issues or challenges that we're going through. I think with me, when I say community, is what they have in me is someone who's going to show up and going to listen. Because far too long in law enforcement, we always say we're solution driven. We're going to come in and tell you what your problem is and we'll fix it for you. And that's not it. We really have to just listen and find out how do we work together to keep the community safe. And I do say community a lot because that's always been my passion. For example, when I was in Central Division down in South Sacramento as a commander, I always look for opportunities. How do we get our officers to really have the mindset of open and just interacting with members of our community in non-law enforcement interactions? And so we had a storage container brought to us because we had to store homeless property. The new laws that we were under said we had to store it for 90 days. Well, this shipping container is just like you would see it comes off of a large ship. It had, it just looked bad, and it was sitting in our parking lot. And I thought, what great way we can do as a project for us to bring people together to work on this. So we partnered with our youth services unit and figured community relations unit, and how would we get community members to come help us paint this? And so we got an artist from the Children of Truth Museum, and we did a big paint by numbers. And we got kids that were at-risk kids. As a matter of fact, I remember one of the parents he said he was on parole, and he says he's never done something like this. And it was where our officers and members of our community painted a mural on this shipping container that said community on it. And it was, to me, it was the most rewarding experience, not to just be part of it, but to sit back and watch it organically happen between human beings. Because that's what it is we're human beings providing services to human beings. And far too often we allow barriers to come up based off of it, whether it's media attention, national narrative, maybe it's uprising in communities, and immediately walls go up. And what I'm always committed to is let's have the tough conversations. I don't have lived experience. I really don't, but I'm always willing to listen. And that's what I mean by being able to say, I know what communities need. They need someone that's going to sit and listen, and it's willing to hear them and try and work things out, not solve the problem, but be like that partner in change of here are the issues. And then how do we, because we are members of this community as well, how do we provide that service and make sure everyone is safe?
Do you see, maybe I'm looking for something that doesn't exist, but say with Chief Hahn, where that position is a more or less an appointed position,
correct,
versus an elected position. How do you work against the tendency to answer the squeakiest wheels? And make sure that the entire assembly is oiled, if I can extend that metaphor that long. There's a lot of folks that don't. It's an elected office.
Yeah.
Look, Sheriff, if you want my vote and my money, you need to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, that doesn't happen with me. And the reality is I feel I'm driven by faith, and it's always doing the right thing is going to be important for me. I look at, and kind of what you're saying is, being part of the elected official, as an elected official versus an appointed where you answer more towards the city council and a city manager, that's tough to navigate. But when you're responsible and you have to be responsive to the people in the community, that to me is a privilege, because if you're elected, that means people believe in you, trust in you, and they share your vision. Now it's my job to show up and deliver on everything I said. What we're seeing nowadays in some politics is people will say what they want to for the 90 days leading up to an election, and then they never show up. And what I pride myself on is I deliver. When I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And if something changes, I'm going to let you know why something changed. But I think where I really pride myself up is being present and showing up even when cameras are not there, microphones are not there, because that's when the real work happens. And I'll give you an example. When I went to North Patrol as a commander, it was in the heart of the pandemic. I always take pride in meeting my community leaders and having that relationship before a major incident happens. Well, within 30 days, George Floyd happened. And I was like, how do we navigate this? We're in a pandemic. So I started reaching out to the community partners up in North, and there was a group that wanted nothing to do with us because we had a strained relationship, and I say us being the sheriff's office, a strained relationship with them. It was in the Arden Arcade area. And I remember getting on a Zoom call, and for 45 minutes, there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of yelling. But what I really took from that was the pain of, here we go again. We're in the same situation we have been in the past with other, not only locally, but even nationwide incidents. And I was trying to explain, I'm here to help, but here I was, a new face in a new command. And I told myself, how many times have they heard this before? And I remember waking up one morning and I just said, it was my daily devotion. I said, God, let me see through lenses I've never seen before. Let me hear voices I've never heard before, because we have to figure this out. Enough is enough. And the reality is my drive and motivator is we have to do it for our kids, because at some point in time, we're going to hand all this off to them. And if we're willing to do the work and put in the work, we're going to feel good about what we hand off. And so what I promised that group I was working with was, I'm going to be here and I'm going to continue showing up no matter how tough the conversations were. And time again, I kept showing up and the conversations changed. And then I finally flipped the script a little bit. If you're willing to work on some of these changes, you have to be ready. And I asked them, are you ready to hear some of the noise from people you organize? Because now if you're finally willing to be part of that change and we link arms and we're committed to fixing this, knowing there's going to be incidents nationwide, that we got to not turn and go see nothing's changed. We got to say, no, we're committed, we're different. And are you willing and able to handle that? Because that's a leadership issue and a challenge. When you have people you organize that are very vocal against law enforcement, to now stand there arm in arm and they say, wait a minute, now you're working with law enforcement. And I'm proud to say 2.5 years later, we're like best friends. And we're actually working a pilot program in the North area with a community response team. And it's that same group that has partnered with us. And a lot of them who were very vocal in that very first meeting keep saying, I never thought we would be here. And I said, because I committed to you, I'll keep showing up.
Now, you keep showing up, and I'll take anybody at their word until they prove otherwise. Does what you say represent the North, missing the actual or the term, that the north area of your responsibility at either now or at the time, is it reflective of the organization, or is that just Chief Deputy Barnes?
No, it's reflective, but it's been tough. One thing I pride myself on is being able to affect change in culture, and that's internally through our organization. Because when I started going to briefings and saying, we're going to start partnering with this group, we're going to do a community response team, I got a lot of pushback. I mean, people came to my office and they said, this is not going to work. There are certain groups in this community that hate us, and I said, we're going to get there. And so it took my reputation and my willingness to kind of, like, I always call it tone at the top. This is what we're doing because it's the right thing to do, knowing we were going to have to navigate difficult times. So to answer your question, the North area, yes. And not only did it work and work so well in the North area, and we still have a long way to go, But there are members who worked in the North area under the sheriff's office that were helping me build this out, that rotated and transferred to South Patrol, that started taking it to South Patrol and then went into the school systems, and they're trying to take it in the school systems. And what we're realizing is that's beyond the scope of the group we're working with, because they have a designated area that they need to control. And we realized recently, matter of fact, past couple of weeks, we had a conversation, we think it's growing too fast. And so my goal is to get it county-wide, but to be sustainable. And I will tell you, through that George Floyd incident, there were people within, because of the protests that were happening, the pandemic and everything that was going on in the media. And you have to remember too, a lot of our officers kept telling their families, I need to go to work because my community needs me. And they're sitting at the dinner table and they're watching what's going on the media with the protests. And even some of their own family members making comments on social media. There was a lot of people that I felt were really going, is it worth it? Is this worth it to put my life on the line? Because when they tell their loved one they leave the table, I got to go to work. And they go, is it worth it? And they're watching the TV. They're seeing
Do you view your career path and your aspiration as calling?
I do. I really do. I think, I've said it before, it doesn't matter what the role it is, what's the goal? And the goal is to fix it. And my goal is to put Sacramento as kind of like the blueprint. So other communities can come look and say, how are the relationships built when it's been strained? How do you put a roadmap together for success? And then how can people come learn from us? Because we're the capital of California.
What are the measures of success? It's one of those things, it's like, how do you know you've gotten there? You've arrived at a destination.
I don't know if we've ever arrived. Because
I will not only agree, I'll get up on a soapbox and say, whatever success is, we're not there.
No.
So aspirationally, this is what I got off of the Jim Barnes for Sheriff site. Mm-hmm. I know what it takes to keep our community safe, end quote. That is so, from a preacher's perspective, I could preach on that for a couple of days.
Right.
In terms of how you come at that, you're saying that, but there's, I don't know how many people live in the county, 500,000?
1.6, yes.
1.6 million in the county, yeah. I was trying to segregate the city from the county, but 1.6 million in the county. If I live in, will I have the same answer or come at this question or this statement the same way if I live in Alberta versus eastern part of Sacramento County?
So what I mean by that, and it is, you mentioned it earlier, it's a bold statement. For me, what I mean is what I have learned through this journey in running for sheriff is I want to run an organization that's going to be responsive to the people we serve. And that's everywhere in the county. What I have learned is that the position comes with influence, and being able to utilize that influence in a positive way of always being at the table, always being willing to have the conversations, because I think if we can adopt that everybody has a voice mindset, and being willing to say, okay, this is what we need, because it is going to be fluid as we move forward in law enforcement, community relations. But the most important thing we can get is trust. And the only way you build trust is building a relationship, and that relationship is constantly showing up.
Relationships are messy.
They are if they're for self-fulfilling reasons.
Well, don't tell that to my wife. They're messy.
Yes.
Just being in relationship,
Yeah.
it puts one at risk. It creates vulnerability.
Yes.
I appreciate how you framed past approach that, well, I know what the problem is. Here's the solution. Take two of these. Call me in the morning.
Yeah.
Approach to life, and well, I'm the patient.
Yeah.
Doctor, are you going to listen to me? Are you going to listen to me? Or are you going to come in and prescribe a solution?
So for me, it's you have to listen and you find out what it is. But knowing that we represent in the county, 1.6 million people, how do we make sure that we're responsive to public safety? And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is we need the communities to feel safe. And in order to have that safety, we need to have buy-in from that community on the trust. Our saying in the sheriff's office, before I even came on, I believe, was service with concern. I would love to flip that and say, I want our communities to be proud of us. And when they see an officer, be proud that we're the ones that are policing for them. How we get there, I'll be honest, I don't know. But being willing to listen and try and navigate this and put a path together, because there's people there's people in our communities that want nothing to do with law enforcement, and I've run across them, ones that I've tried to talk to and say, they're not interested. So then I would always ask them, if you're ever interested, I just need you to answer this one question. When we link arms, are you prepared to deal with some of the noise from the people you organize? And because you've been so forward-facing and outward-spoken against law enforcement, the community should want us to succeed. Because if we succeed and the community succeeds, we're going to have one of the safest environments around here. I firmly believe that. I believe we would set that blueprint for other counties or whatever you want to call it throughout the region would want to come learn from.
Well, I want you to succeed if we have a shared definition of success. Mm-hmm. You can, I guess there's a way of assuring safety. That begs the question, what is safe? Mm-hmm. What is a safe community? You can lock it down. You can lock it. Well, it's safe, but nobody's out on the streets.
Correct.
Nobody's interacting.
Correct.
It's safe. Well, that's not a place I want to live. Mm-hmm. I want to live in a place where I can engage and just be. Just be. Mm-hmm. Just be. We're Chief Deputy. We are like speeding through this. I am out of time, but you've already committed to at least two more.
Yes.
At least two more.
Yeah.
Let's pretend. Let's play what if. You are now, you've won the election. Mm-hmm. You are Sacramento County Sheriff.
Yes. It's
kind of like that dog that chases after a car and got the hubcap in his teeth. And it's like, now what are you gonna do with it? Have you thought about the top 2 or 3 things you would focus on once you've been sworn in?
Yes, sir.
You want to share, or is that?
I do. No, yes, I would love to. I think the biggest, there's a couple of areas that we need to look at. The biggest issue that I hear about is homelessness and people experiencing mental health. But for me, it's always strengthening relationships in the communities and finding whatever that platform is. If it's a advisory council, if it's faith-based, community-led council, just having people at a table that can speak on what the issues that are happening and how do we fit in there in our current role and assignment. But for one thing that I'm really pushing hard on, and I'm proud of it because nobody in the country is doing it. It's being done here locally at the juvenile level, but not at the adult level and nowhere in the country. And that is the population that comes into the jails, the offender population. We have, through our reentry services and corrections, we have some of the lowest recidivism numbers in the nation. They've been audited, it's been fact-checked. And so when I was a commander at our branch jail, I looked at community differently. But everybody that was there is part of our community because eventually they're going to reintegrate back into the community. So when I learned about our reentry programming and how successful it was, I said, okay, if this is successful, why is it? And I immersed myself into the whole programming side of it. And the main reason it comes down to is it's called a risk needs assessment that is being done on the population that's part of the reentry programming. And what you do is you get to the root cause of the criminogenic behavior. So for example, if I'm sexually assaulted as a kid, but today as an adult, I am breaking into cars or whatever I can do to get money because I have a dope habit, we now go to court and you get sent to diversion to hopefully get clean, but we're not dealing with the root cause of what's causing that behavior. So what I'm pushing for, and we're actually moving towards it, and we're gonna get this going by the end of this year into the next year, is risk needs assessment on offender populations that come in, and we're gonna identify the root cause. If it's people experiencing homelessness, if it's a mental health issue, it's now getting the county partners attached to the individual at the front end. Because right now they come in, they go through the justice system, they get out the door and we say, hopefully you can go to your appointment, this is what you need, and they don't show up. And I think one of the most dangerous things we give people is hope without follow through. And we need to be responsible in that. And this is a way to do it, is do a risk needs assessment. If it is someone experiencing homelessness, attach the groups. You have county-based organizations that do phenomenal jobs, but we work in silos. And this is a way that we can come collectively, put a success plan together. So by the time that person leaves, they've already been connected, the relationships have built, they have a success plan on what to do next. And it's not so maybe scary or foreign. Then lean on the community-based organizations to the families if they're going to be reintegrated home. Because that was one thing I noticed. I felt there was probably a little bit of a gap when people left the branch jail and went back home. Were people at home ready to receive them? Because what happens is a lot of them find faith. They tell their loved ones on the phone that, I've changed. This isn't going to happen again, no matter, it may be their first time, maybe they're, multiple times in. And you've had loved ones at home having to navigate, can we pay rent? Can we buy food? Can we keep the lights on? Maybe even having to be evicted. So now you have this individual who comes home with all this energy of cleanliness and excitement and faith to all this,
dealing
challenges
with life.
Yeah. And so then it comes to the pressure on the individual that comes home to provide, because that's what I promised. And so what happens? Are there mechanisms and jobs waiting for them to help them be successful? More often than not, they go home, and what we've seen in my almost now 24 years of, they go home, they feel the stress, and they go back to what they know to raise money. And then they end up getting caught up in a system again, and it's revolving. So for me, doing risk needs assessments on the front end, attaching success teams together, following through the process, partnering with community-based organizations on the outside so there's a smooth handoff and the reintegration back into the family, it's responsible reform. Why would we not do that? You're trying to make the best effort to get an individual back home from a human side, as opposed to, we do this, now we think you need to go to this appointment, and people aren't showing up, and we're seeing it. And I say we owe it to everybody that comes through, because there's people that I've seen it. I having conversations, walking around the branch jail and just talking about the life stories and hearing, there's some similarities to mine. And I think as human beings, we could be one decision away from being in that situation. So how do we look at it from a human standpoint, and how do we help? Because I'm gonna tell you now, there is evil out there. And there are people that wake up that will look to victimize people. And when that happens, that's why we have institutions. That's why we have correctional facilities. But others who have grown up in a bad environment, and that is the lifestyle that they know, why can't we help and try and integrate ourselves? And as a community, being from a county and our profession, how do we help? And now ultimately that individual has to put forth the effort and to get it done. But we can provide all this treatment, all this resources, and get them on a path to success.
Well, I'll definitely be praying for you as you continue to navigate these choppy seas in terms of just now, not even aspirationally, but now. I would like to see, nobody asked, you didn't even ask.
That's okay.
But I would like to see what you just articulated to be elevated to the same level as all the other enforcement areas of law enforcement,
Correct.
if you will.
Yeah.
Too often, those things that are proven to be helpful and to break cycle are they're like the and one to the game, if you will. That's a bad metaphor, but it's oh yeah, we need to have some community. No, it needs to be core to what we're doing and to be a part of our very when we raise children. We don't look at different activities, math, attention to math, attention to sports, taking out the garbage. They're not ancillary to life. That's life. And if one is not careful, law enforcement can have the approach of every problem will have the same solution. Let's just get tough. Let's just bring the law enforcement hammer down, and you have safe community again. But you don't have community. You have a safe environment.
No, you're right. And I think that's what the community response team that I talked about in the North area, that's that same mindset, is identifying areas that might have a high crime area and now bring community-based organizations together, and we can share those statistics and say, hey, we're seeing this. Where in your profession, where in your expertise do you think you can integrate yourself? And maybe it's getting people additional services through CalAIM or whatever it may be. And then we go into that from that holistic approach. And then we should be the last layer of integration of saying, we've tried everything we can, and crime is still happening. We ask you to enforce it. But it's how do we bring everybody together? And this is what I mentioned was, I've risen to the level of chief deputy, and I listen and I watch other county organizations, I watch other community-based organizations, and people are doing amazing work, but we don't do well working together. And I think of being able to utilize my position to bring everybody together and go, here's the problem, whether it's an apartment complex, whether it's an area, what can we do to integrate that same mindset of what services can be provided? And if someone doesn't want that and they want to be resistive and they want to victimize our communities, then that's where we get involved. But outside of that, we should make every attempt on the front end. And I feel by doing that, then that's a holistic approach from what we talked about community buy-in. When I talked about as a kid, if I was acting up down the street, someone came out the house and walked me home. Right now, it's people look out the window, go, thankfully it's not happening in my house. And this is the way we can come back together and say, how do we address these issues together? Not, again, being solution driven, just being open and willing. Here's a conversation. This is what we know is happening. What can you do from your expertise? What can you from your expertise from county-based and community-based organizations? And how do we address these issues? And we do it strategically and together, knowing that we're telling everybody we're trying to help, increase just life for people. That's the way I see it.
See, that'll preach. Chief Deputy Jim Barnes, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And I look forward to the next opportunity for you to come back and be a part of race culture in the church.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.